as I said, Fiordland. So this little pocket down the southern western end of New Zealand. So a must-see destination for nature lovers, outdoor enthusiasts, and anyone really who appreciates natural beauty. If you haven't been to Fiordland, you might have heard of a few key destinations there. Probably heard of Milford Sound, which is often referred to as the jewel in the crown of Fiordland. So Rudyard Kipling also described it as the eighth wonder of the world. And it's basically as today, as he would have seen it in the 1890s, as it has remained relatively untouched throughout history. So you've probably seen the stunning fjord and then the towering mountains, the waterfall, and rich array of marine life. And as I mentioned, it's the jewel in the crown, but it's the jewel of the crown in Fiordland National Park, which is New Zealand's largest national park. And there are many hiking trails, and people go for the stunning scenery, taking flights and cruises around the area as well. Dusky and doubtful sounds are also popular, and while they don't have the lofty peaks of Milford Sound, they are no less stunning, but they are less crowded. So if you're looking for something a bit more peaceful and tranquil, they are a fabulous destination to visit while in Fiordland. And then the wildlife as well. So it has a rich and a diverse range of wildlife, from dolphins and seals and penguins, and then the native birds such as the kakapo and the kiwi. And this is why I have brought a special guest presenter in today, Glenda Darling. She is an expert. She is not only a guide through Fiordland, but she has a background in geology and environmental science as well. And she is going to go a little bit more in depth and tell you about Fiordland. So welcome, Glenda. Good to have you here. Glenda, are you there?
Sorry, I got a bit too excited there to unmute my...
I'm not sure what's happened to Glenda. I did see her on the call just a minute ago, and we did practice this morning, so I will... Not sure what's happened. Okay. I do apologise for that. I have a few extra slides that I was going to present at the end of the presentation. So I will jump into those slides. Oh, okay. Sorry, I've just got a note saying that Glenda is available. Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry, Glenda.
Yes.
Okay, take it away.
Hey, I'll just share my screen. Hi, everybody. I'm Glenda. While I share my screen, I'll just say a little bit about myself. I'd like to say Fiordland is one of my favourite places, as you might have noticed. It is, well, I'm from Southland, so it's a little bit like my extended backyard, which is really cool. Does everybody see my slides okay?
Yes, I can.
Yep, cool.
Thank you.
Awesome, cool. So yeah, Fiordland being my backyard, it's also one of my favourite places to tramp and four-wheel drive and boat around, but also it's one of my favourite places to show people around. So as Nissa said, Fiordland's quite extensive. The national park itself is 1.2 million hectares with over 13 fjords. So there's definitely a lot to explore, but it's also really nice in the fact that we have a lot to show you, I guess, and a lot of places to hide, a lot of places to explore, so lots of variety. That it's a lot deeper in the water column than it actually is. So that's where you get these black corals and also blue cod and crayfish, which are pretty tasty. And we have a few cetaceans and other marine species that frequent the fjords, quite a few pods of bottlenose dolphins and a few other dolphin species that frequent the fjords here. So the rain also helps create these really unique landscapes that have also been sculpted by ice, but also have a little bit of a tectonic influence as well. So from the steep fjords of Milford in the north to the less steep and more rugged fjords of Chalky and Preservation in the south, and some beautiful beaches as well. But also our rain gives us all these magnificent waterfalls that are dotted around every fjord. But it also creates a little bit of a photographer's paradise, creating these quite mythical landscapes with the clouds and also with these rays of sun that burst through the clouds. And also something I take a little bit for granted, of course, as a Southlander, we get a little bit of rain, but we also get a lot of rainbows as well, frequenting us as we're cruising around the fjords and sometimes following us. So Fiordland has quite an extensive history from the early Māori that would use it for food gathering and also gathering pounamu or greenstone, right through to Captain Cook and our early European explorers. And he paved the way for early industry, so such as our sealers, miners, fishermen, and later through to the deer hunters and of course tourism. Now a lot of people don't really know this, and I guess until I started working in the fjords I didn't really realize this either, but we have quite a few firsts in Fiordland. So we have the first house and shipbuilding such as Luncheon Cove here, and also the first maps, and the first women, children, and insurance fraud. So this rugged place certainly has a lot of stories. I'm not going to explain too much because you'll have to come into Fiordland to discover that for yourself. But for example, we have Richard Henry, one of our first conservationists, paving the way for other conservationists in New Zealand and other conservation projects. So like Breaksea Island, some of our first predator-free islands, and also helping pave the way for recovering species such as kiwi and our kakapo, which you might not see, but you might see footprints and feathers of. So we still do have quite a bit of wildlife around Fiordland despite the pests. We have quite a bit of marine life, so like our albatross, we can have up to 5 species of our albatrosses alone frequenting the coast and in the fjords. We have other species such as shags, our bottlenose dolphins, and sometimes the odd whale, sometimes, and also our tawaki or our Fiordland crested penguins, and our recovering populations of New Zealand fur seals, which quite often come up and have a look. So it's quite nice to see, despite the extensive sealing industry, they're still recovering, and we get cute small creches and little bays and hidden waterfalls and things. So that's really cool. So on to our flora. We have extensive flora in the fjords. This one's one of my favourite places, Wet Jacket Arm. And you walk up this little creek up to this lake called Moose Lake. And as you can see, it's pretty mythical. You walk past things such as these kidney ferns that are illuminated by the light, and also past this big mythical beech tree. So our forests are predominantly beech, and this one is just dripping with mosses. It's one of my favourite places to take customers. So it's the grandfather or the wizard tree. We like to call it, very mythical. And also things like our crown fern. Without our varied weather, we don't get these landscapes. And also things like the crown fern having the jewels in the crown, such as hail or snow in this case. And more of our beautiful beech forest and our subalpine forest. It actually doesn't take us too long to get into some of these subalpine environments where the bush turns to scrub and opens up to these beautiful vistas. And we have little hidden gems. Every season brings a variety of these orchids. Some of them quite fragrant, some of them quite small, such as the spider orchid. And also fungi as well. So that's about this time of year, which I love finding different fungi and different plant species, such as our coastal Alaria. So as I mentioned before, our fjords, they all have different aspects to them, from preservation in the south being quite low-lying and quite rounded hills, to dusky, which is a little bit in the middle, starting to get steeper, but lots of spectacular arms to tuck into and explore, to Milford Sound, up in the north, quite steep and quite stunning in its own way. And of course, to top all this history, flora and fauna off, quite often you have to get in or out of Fiordland by helicopter, and any one of these helicopter rides, anytime, any helicopter ride in Fiordland is always spectacular. I always recommend it for anyone going into the area. So that's about me. I thought I'd finish off with a little picture of the Explorer in George Sound. So I hope I've given you quite a quick, but quite a good overview to experience the area.
Fantastic. Thank you, Glenda. If anyone has any questions for Glenda, pop them in the chat and we can come back and ask her. But I was just wondering, when is your next trip out there? When are you guiding next in Fiordland?
In June.
Okay.
June.
Yep.
Yeah. So when Explorer gets back into Fiordland, I'm going to go around from Bluff to Preservation. So yeah, that's going to be really exciting. I kind of get withdrawals going into Fiordland.
Imagine it's such a beautiful landscape. And actually, I was lucky enough to be there in January this year. So I do have a couple of slides to share myself. So I will just go back to sharing my screen, and then hopefully this works without a hitch. Cool, there we go, fantastic. But before I go into those slides, Wild Earth Travel, we go to Fiordland pretty much all year round. And as Glenda mentioned, there is something different to see depending on the time of year. We have access to 8 vessels and many more itineraries. So depending on what you want to see and the style of travel you want to take and how much time that you've got, there's something for everyone there. So please do reach out and we can align you with something that suits you. At the moment, we have a couple of promotions on. I'm not sure if you've seen this one. This is the Heritage Explorer. So the vessel that Glenda just mentioned then, she will be on in June. So you might be able to meet her in person if you would like. So it's 18 guest expedition yacht, and we have a promotion of $500 off New Zealand per person for our 2023 departures. But on top of that, for the upcoming June, July holidays, we have a kids travel free with every paying adult on 2 of our trips. So Doubtful and Dusky Sounds, end of June to the 4th of July, and then another one from the 4th to the 10th of July. So they are available for booking until the 31st of May or until sold out. So please do let us know if you are interested. Or if you are interested in cruising around Fiordland in something a little bit bigger. As I mentioned, I was lucky enough to travel there at the start of this year, and this is the vessel that I traveled on. So it's a little bit bigger. It's got room for 140 passengers. And I would say the vessel itself is a a luxury expedition liner. So you've got all your amenities on board, as well as access to this beautiful landscape off board as well. So there are a couple of different trips that you can do. I did the 6-day trip where we went to Fiordland and Stewart Island, but if you've got a little bit more extra time, you can add on the snares with an 8-day trip, or if you've got extra time over 12 days, you can do Stewart Island, Fiordland, the snares, and the sub-Antarctic islands as well. So I'll just take you through some of my trip. So I did take my 2 daughters on board, and my husband as well. So a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. I probably wouldn't have taken anyone any younger than that, but they were of an age where they were able to, do most of the activities and have a lot of fun along the way. As you can see there, we would get into our all wet weather gear and do some of the bigger trams, and then some of the just the ones on the paved roads as well. So with this trip, we actually started in Queenstown, where we met quite a few of the fellow passengers, and we stayed the night there, and then we caught a private bus down to Bluff, and then we took the ferry over the Foveaux Strait, and we came into beautiful Stewart Island. And we effectively spent a day just cruising around Oban Township, which is a really lovely, quaint little town. It's got all you need, takeaways, the Seafarers pub as well, and a gift shop, and a few other points of interest. And we went for a little walk up through the lookout, where we saw our vessel waiting for us in the bay. So then we walked down there and we hopped on. So it was a really good mix of luxury and expedition. You've got your pool, spa, gym, sauna on board, and lots of open spaces. We did a bit of an impromptu Pilates class on the deck, and there's plenty of spaces to read a book or just relax, as you can see here in the common areas such as the library, but also the bar, which is where a lot of the presentations were given, and that's the captain there. So you'd get daily briefings, as well as special lectures from some of the onboard naturalists or botanists or historians, which there are quite a few of, and who will also accompany you to some of your exploration as well. And I would say one of the real highlights was mealtime, which was amazing. As you can see, my 2 girls there on the children's table that we set up for the evening. There was always a full kind of buffet, but also a la carte menu, and it was 5-star every day. But I think the highlight would have to have been the expedition. And then, so, we're on a big ship. How do you get around and have a look at all those little points of interest that Glenda mentioned before? And it's on the zodiacs, as you can see there. And we would go on 1 or 2 outings a day, and we'd just cruise around. We spent a few hours on Ulva Island, where we had an expert guide who taught us all about the flora and fauna on that predator-free island. And then the highlight was really just cruising around and seeing those little nooks and crannies where the hero of the show is really the nature and the wildlife as well. As you can see, a tui bird singing us a little song there. And then the expert guiders as well. So naturalists telling us about what we were finding in the bush there. And there's Milford Sound as well. So as I mentioned, the jewel in the crown. And, we cruised in about 7 a.m. in the morning, and it was magical. What I learned is that little veil of cloud is called the Milford Sound striptease. And it really does just kind of peel off. And then you get these beautiful mountains and waterfalls that just kind of jut out of nowhere, which is absolutely spectacular. And another highlight was the sunsets, which were just amazing, just the pastel colors that would just kind of shine out. So it was an amazing trip, and I'm very jealous of your job, Glenda, and I can see how you get withdrawals when you're not in Fiordland. Let me just check and see if we have any questions as I unshare the screen. I can't see any questions. If you have any questions that you think of later, please do just send them through, and we can always address them. I guess one question that I did have is that if you don't have too much time up your sleeve, I know it would be good to spend, 10 days, but if you had 5 days, what would you recommend kind of going to see or type
What
of?
would I?
Yeah, what would you put on your Fiordland itinerary, your must-dos for 5 days, if that's all you had?
My must-dos for 5 days. That's really hard. But I would definitely, so yeah, if you've got 5 days or shorter, I would say Dusky. Dusky is my favorite fjord, and it has so much. So you've got a lot of the early history, so the Captain Cook history, the sealers, and that as well. But you also have the wildlife there too. So there is a resident pod of dolphins. Of course, it is wildlife, so it's never guaranteed. But Dusky has quite an extensive network of arms, and it's also part of a bigger complex. So you have the Dusky Breaksea complex, and of course, our wet jacket arm that I mentioned before is pretty spectacular, heading up Herrick Creek to Moose Lake there. But also for Dusky, there's a lot of options there. So there is anything from, if you want to, do more of the, bushwalks that are, right in the bush, to areas such as Astronomer's Point, the Captain Cook historical site that has really easy access for the boardwalk there. And so, yeah, variety of landscapes there, the history and the nature there too. Preservation is pretty cool as well. Quite a bit of history there with the Pewsica Point Lighthouse, with mining and whalers, and pretty spectacular landscapes. Also that pretty distinctive Tarawera aluminium smelter. So I'd recommend those. Of course, Milford as well. That's pretty spectacular. Those stunning, basically cliff faces that are pretty bare. And of course, that striptease that you talked about. But yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And you did mention that, it doesn't matter what time of year you go, there is something to see. You might get more waterfall action or that whatnot. But what is your favorite time of year to go?
Oh, my favorite time, personally, that's really hard. I guess September's usually pretty good. You have a good mix of things going on. The weather can be pretty good. I mean, that being said, people think that winters, you shouldn't go in there in winter, but there's actually a good mix. Like, it's not always raining. People think it's always raining in there, but it's not. You do get a mix of fine days. And, some of the trips I've had in the middle of winter have been, 10-day trips, and 8 of them have been beautiful sunny weather. So, it just sort of depends what you're doing, and as long as you have good raincoat and that, a lot of these places are pretty accessible, and you're in the bush quite a bit too.
Yes, yep. And your sandfly repellent.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that, but you kind of got used to it. And there were none on the boat, which is quite good. So I don't travel out there, but when we were in, the bush, then and we'd get quite you cover up, then it was fine as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, like you get you have the rainy days and that, and you get less sandflies, whereas if you have the finer days with less wind, you get more sandflies. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. I did see we had a question there. What's the best time of year for wildlife spotting? So it really depends what type of wildlife you want to see. With the Fiordland crested penguins, they usually leave in the summertime, so about November, December. Although we have seen the odd one, I think it was the trip that you were on in January. We did manage to spot a couple, but they're mainly there kind of in the winter months before they head out foraging for the summer. The dolphins, they're resident, so we have the chance to see them any time of year. and they're resident in dusky and doubtful sounds. They're a bit more infrequent in Milford. Yeah, and the bird life, I mean, pretty much any time of year. Of course, different times of year, different wildlife will be doing different things. Of course, in the spring, you'll have some of the newer Fiords pups. And also sometimes we see the odd shag colony as well. You might have seen the picture before, that was on Anchor Island. And so they'll be on their nests and they'll have young ones with them. Another question about whales. Yes, we do get the odd whale there. Traditionally, of course, it used to be an area of extensive whaling. They believe southern whites used to breed there, but we get them infrequently, so not all the time. But of course, we have several passengers plus us and a few sea passages, a few short sea passages. So there's always the chance